Thank you for having me, first of all. Entrepreneurial journey. It's been a long journey. It didn't start off so fruitful. I started just like everyone who's interested in starting a business and building something successful, something financially successful and independent. I think that there was this misconception that I had getting into entrepreneurship, thinking that entrepreneurship is really a sprint and not a marathon. So one gets into entrepreneurship thinking in the beginning, I want to make money, I want to make money quick. And you realize very fast that everything you see on the outside, as far as the journeys are concerned, is typically the stuff that is marketed. You don't see the challenges that a founder goes through, and you don't see the various things that actually make it extremely difficult. And it's a challenge. I usually say that anyone can become a financial major, anyone can become an architect, but not everyone can become an entrepreneur. And I think the reason, I think the one characteristic, if you asked me, when it comes to entrepreneurship, what is it? I think it's more heart-related than it is mind-related. It makes people be willing to try and fail. Just to get back to your question, my first business failed. I got in and I wanted to start a grooming business about 15 years ago. And until today, by the way, I didn't want to acknowledge that failure. So I kept on paying the bank its dues until today, as far as installments are concerned. So that was an absolute failure, which I don't talk about much, but I learned a lot from it. My second venture was actually another company, which I actually called Tarabut as well, which we had to downsize because of the change in market conditions. So I think the one thing, given that we're speaking to students in university, I think the most important thing to highlight is that we have this perception of a fear of failure when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I think that's something that we as Arabs in the Gulf primarily need to break away from. There's no shame in failing in an entrepreneurial role. There's a lot of ways that you can learn from. And I think usually I say that I learned very expensive mistakes, but when you do bigger things, I think there's a lot of takeaways that make it easier. So I think my first two businesses were failures. My third and fourth, which I'm now working on, have proven to be a lot more successful. And if you ask me, I think if I was to look at how would I have mitigated these two mistakes that I made in the beginning, it would be to read more and learn from other people's mistakes, I think. But yeah, I started my entrepreneurship in a grooming business based in Bahrain, and then I established an investment management company in London that was primarily focused on investing in assets, all sorts of assets, being fixed assets, like real estate and things like that. And now, obviously, my most exciting journey, which is Tarabut Gateway.
Yeah. To pick up on an issue, something that you mentioned earlier, which is when it comes to traits and characteristics that entrepreneurs usually have. There is always this argument that there are no certain characteristics, like we can list them A, B, and C, but there is always something in a person that will make him a good entrepreneur, or let's say someone who will be willing to go through this journey, like you said, that it's not always great. So if we could highlight these traits, and if you would also describe, let's say, how would you describe yourself when it comes to your personality?
I think, Isra, if you ask a lot of people, I was thinking about this last night in preparation for today, and I was thinking of, if you ask a lot of people about entrepreneurship, people tend to think money is what defines success or failure. I disagree with that. I think there's two characteristics which, in my opinion, define whether a entrepreneur becomes successful or not. And they're two words that I use a lot. One is conviction, is to be completely convicted in believing in what you're doing, even when the people around you don't. And even when people that you particularly have, be it family or people that you love that are around you that tell you there is a potential for this to fail. So having that very clear conviction and vision that you can see it, regardless of everyone doesn't get it. You're the only person that get it. So that's the most important thing. And then the moment you can actually see that thing right in front of you, materialize or visualize it. The second thing is perseverance. Perseverance, in my opinion, is because the role to be able to achieve scale and to be able to achieve the growth that you're looking for requires a real push, requires you to push down boundaries. And for some reason, I think the entire ecosystem around us in the Gulf has been blessed to a certain extent that we don't really challenge the status quo. We do things because that's the way they're done, and we don't really challenge. And I think here, the entrepreneurs, the founders that really do break grounds and do things need to have, I think, two characteristics. One is conviction, and the second is perseverance. And I'll tell you, just I'll just expand on that answer. A lot of people that you go to and speak to today will probably tell you, yeah, I have a great idea, but I don't have the money to do it. And it's counterintuitive. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is, I think money is the least of every entrepreneur's worry in the beginning of the journey. And I don't say that it's counterintuitive, and I'll tell you why I say that. It's because there are a lot of investment vehicles that are out there in the region whose sole mandate is to find entrepreneurs to invest in. Their mandate is not to find successful entrepreneurs, because by then it's too late to invest in them. They have to find success stories that are willing to be rolled out. And I think what defines that is these two things. What do you look for in an extremely success story that's waiting to happen? And I think that's finding someone that absolutely is convicted to their vision, believes in what it is that they want to do. And the second thing is this person won't take no for an answer. And I think it's very easy to identify these people in classrooms, because in some cases they might be, I wasn't the best student. And I think if you ask around my teachers and if you ask about me in school, I was a smart kid. I did well in school. I never failed. But I was also the one that didn't take no for an answer. And I always would substantiate it. And I think you'd see these people who can be entrepreneurs. They have some leadership skills, which leadership, I think, is something that can be taught. But the first two, I think, are the most important, are to have conviction before anything, and ultimately really believing in what it is that you want to do. I'll give you an example from my perspective. I think not a lot of people know this about Tarabut Gateway. I obviously had an idea one day and we wanted to do it, but the immediate reaction was everyone around you would tell you what you're doing is wasting time. This is not something that's going to work. It's not something that is currently regulated. So these are all things that I think is very important. So if an entrepreneur wants to start any kind of business, I think to have that conviction towards the business, to have that perseverance where they won't take no for an answer, they'll challenge the status quo, they'll push boundaries, and they'll make it happen. And then the last thing is the funding. If you have these two things and you have a robust business plan, the funding is the easy part. And the more successful you get, the more you'll realize that the people around you that were saying no about what you're doing are the people that will come running after you, asking if they can actually invest into the business that you've now built. So I think there's this counterintuitive thing that when we're taught entrepreneurship, we're taught how to treat money and how to look at our financial statements and how to build growth. But I think the most important thing is also the softer aspect of to have that heart, to have that desire, to have that conviction, to really want to build something that is exceptional. And these are what the success stories that I've been reading about all have in common, is that perseverance, that conviction.
So what I could read from, let's say, your journey is that, like you mentioned, that there were challenges, that these challenges were not just related to family, friends, perception, or let's say thinking about what you are trying to achieve in your journey, but also could be related to other challenges, let's say, as you mentioned, in the status quo and in the context that we are in. So if you could also elaborate on that and how easy it is in terms the road to success with those challenges.
So to my earlier point, I just want to make sure that there's one message that resonates, that 1 in a million get that opportunity to actually embark into something that is sprint success and not a marathon. Every success story that you read about today is typically a very long journey, a lot of ups and downs. I can hear a noise, but I'm not sure if it's me or...
No, no, this was one of the participants. Guys, please make sure you're mute. All right, he's already mute now.
So I think we're living through a very interesting time, Isra. I think if I was an entrepreneur that was coming to the region 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I'd say, what are the typical businesses that you can get into? We need to now accept that we're all going through a digital transformation. With change comes opportunity. When you travel the world and when you go and see, there's a lot of opportunities out there that can be rebuilt into the region here, and really for technology to play its role. I think that with the changes will come a lot of opportunities, but all of these opportunities that you're likely to bring into the game today are probably going to require regulatory changes, are probably going to require new user adoptions, new product market fits that haven't been tested before, new capital raise initiatives. So these are all things that go back to, I think my earlier point is you as an entrepreneur must believe and be able to answer any question that hits you when it comes to this. You must believe in it and be able to challenge everything that's put in front of you. So I do think that there's a lot of opportunity that's coming our way because of the change and the digital transformation that we've embraced here in Bahrain and in the wider region. I think the other very interesting thing that makes it a very exciting time for us here in the region is the availability of venture capital. I think the availability of venture capital 5 or 7 years ago in the region was non-existent. Right now you have Bahrain's Al-Waha Fund of Funds, you have a lot of venture funds that are here, and their job is just to do one thing, is to spot people with a vision, with conviction towards it, and that are willing to sacrifice everything in order to execute that vision. And they're placing bets on them. So I think it's an amazing time for entrepreneurship in the region. And I honestly think that it's the last thing of, do you really just want to have a 9-to-5 job? Or do you want to challenge the status quo and create something that has your name associated to it and to change people's habits to a certain extent?
Yeah, and come up with the concept.
Yeah,
something that doesn't really exist. Yeah. So if we could, let's say, wrap in terms of your entrepreneurial journey, and you could, let's say, some of the tips that you would be advising young entrepreneurs. And for example, we have a large number of students here with us today. In terms of what advice would you give them for? They are young, they are ambitious, and they're trying to achieve. Maybe they will be faced with the struggles, with challenges. So in terms of tips for young entrepreneurs?
I think there's a few things. I think always remember that at times your mind will probably say, no, don't do it. And your heart is what you should be following as an entrepreneur. At certain times, you will have to make decisions which don't make financial sense, but at the end of the day, it's the overall vision. So having conviction is the most important thing. You need to love what you're doing. You need to be able to visualize it. You need to be able to see yourself, I think 5 years from now, speaking to students and sitting down and thinking about how it is, what can you give back? But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is to have conviction, to be able to be willing to make sacrifices. A lot of people will say, look, I'm going to keep my job on the side, but I'll try out something new because I need a net to fall back on. And I'm one of these people that completely disagrees with that. I think if you're going to do something, put your heart into it, put your life into it, and make sure that you give it everything that you've got. So I think you need to love what you do. And this whole, I'll do something on the side, or I'll have the fallback because I have responsibilities. And as a student, you don't have responsibilities right now. Do what you love. If you ask me in terms of one mistake that I probably would have made, is I'd say I started too late. I took the easy route of joining a bank in the beginning and taking the typical route. And if you want to start something, there are people that are starting jumping into the entrepreneurship role without even jumping into jobs in the beginning. So is work experience as important as it was 10 years ago, the way we were taught, for example? I'd say not necessarily. I'd say the one thing, Isra, that I do a lot of, and I think helps me a lot, is genuinely reading. And I only read one type of books, which is biographies and autobiographies. I like to read about the lives of successful people and learn and see where they went wrong, where they went right, because some people would say you need to fail once or twice before you succeed. I disagree with that as well. I think if you read about 2 failures, then it's as if you've lived through them, so you can live through other people's mistakes. I don't think you need to make mistakes. And I think the more a person reads today, the more you'll be able to mitigate. I think there's a misconception also, especially for new joiners into the founders world, is that, yes, this is a sprint. I'll start a business, I'll become a millionaire, and I'll just get up and I'll relax. And I think that's another misconception. You need to love it so much that not care about the money aspect of it, because that's going to come, and that's a side trophy or whatever it is that's happening. But think of it as a marathon, and every time you look at a marathon, you see the people struggle throughout, and you see the expressions on their faces throughout. But as soon as they reach their finish line, they have their arms up in the air and they're celebrating it. So it's very different. So I think that the idea is you need to really be willing to make these sacrifices. It is a marathon. But if you love it so much and you jump into it with complete conviction and passion, then I think it's something that you won't feel, and the sacrifice will be worth it.
Yeah, it's all it leads to what will be. Let's say if you had a vision, and achieving that vision, the satisfaction that you get out of this whole journey, even if it wasn't a pleasant one.
I remember the one thing, just to go back to that, Isra, is going back to, there's no nicer feeling than being able to visualize something and build the product for it, and then sell the product, and then see people using it. I can't explain the satisfaction that it does. I mean, yesterday we had an announcement of a bank going live with our technology, which is getting thousands of users onboarded. To us as a team, when we were just sitting with a whiteboard in front of us saying, can we really do this? Is it going to work? And now actually seeing thousands of people use it, there's genuinely no nicer feeling. And I think that's where that satisfaction goes and kind of balances out all the sacrifices that you tend to make. So it's that conviction of knowing what you want to do and wanting to go after it.
Yeah, and I think the satisfaction also comes from when you see the impact that something that you have done and how it changes, let's say, the way things have been done forever, or it changes people's life. And I think the impact also gives you this sort of satisfaction.
Absolutely. And I think there's another thing which I think as your company grows, that becomes a beautiful feeling, is genuinely loving the people that you work with, but at the same time is when you actually plug out of it yourself and you see that a team is working together without you and can actually continuously deliver. It's a beautiful feeling, because you genuinely feel that, yes, we were able to create something that is not dependent on you, because there are others that have the same kind of conviction towards what you're trying to achieve, and they believe in it just as much as you do. So I think that's comes at a later stage. So it's never the effect of, yes, we've won a deal, we've made some money. No, it's genuinely that impact behind it, the passion that gives you the kind of satisfaction that you look for getting into it.
Yeah, it keeps you going as well.
100%.
Yeah.
And then the nice thing is, as you grow into it, and I don't want to get into, I mean, we're talking entrepreneurship, so I don't want to get into the later aspects of the interviewing process and how you see your team actually get in and things like that. But I think when you're able to convince investors of your idea, that's validation. When you can convince your team members to leave their stable jobs and come and join you in a risky company which doesn't have the capital, doesn't have the security, yet they have their kids and their families to be able, and you can see that conviction, that gives you that kind of self-confidence of, you know what, we're doing something right. If I can persuade 20 people that are working with me, or 5 people that are working with me, that means we're doing something right. And I think that's when you start becoming, the more your team grows, the more confident you become, and the more you're willing to sacrifice to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we focus now, let's say, in terms of Tarabut, which is your latest success story. Well, Tarabut is based, let's say it's the first open banking platform in Bahrain, and I'm sure it's also in the MENA region as well. So maybe if you could, Abdullah, tell students what is open banking. And I would also love to hear from you in terms of how did this whole thing start in terms of your journey going through.
Sure. I'll start with what Tarabut is, then I'll tell you the journey of. So if you think of, it's a little technical, so I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. People say that data is the new oil. Data is the new oil. It's a very valuable resource. The way I see Tarabut, and I go back to TG in its beginnings, is if data is the new oil, then TG is building the modern pipelines. So when you picture it of where we see, so you start thinking of where is data collected today? So if I asked you today, who is it that has the most amount of data about you as an individual? And the answer is, you might think it's your Instagram account or your LinkedIn account or whatever it is. The answer is it's your bank. The reason why I say that is because your bank knows where you have your coffee, how much you pay your kids, how much you pay in tuition fees, when you go out to dinners, what you do for dinners, where you go out. So there's a lot of valuable data in there. Today, when you log into your Amazon account or your YouTube account, the first thing that pops up is the kind of videos that you like to watch or the kind of books that you like to read. Yet when you deal with your bank, it's as if they don't even know you. They don't give you savings products that are specifically focused for you. They don't give you credit cards that are specifically focused for you. And that's one of the ideas that we wanted to go after. So we were thinking, okay, how can a bank get a 360 view, or how can you get a 360 view of your own financial relationships? So we needed to build an infrastructure that connects all of these banks in Bahrain and beyond on a single platform, for me as a user to log in and be able to pull all of my accounts and see it in a more, in an easier way. Where the idea came from is very simple, is I had more than one bank account, and I was hating the experience of trying to go at the end of the month and check how much I spent on my credit card and go and have to settle it. And I wanted to do something that aggregates all of them. Truth be told, is I may have not said this before publicly, but I'll tell you now anyways. We had the idea, we submitted it to the Central Bank of Bahrain, and it was rejected. And then we submitted it again, and it was rejected. And then we submitted it again. So it's not the rosy picture. The idea, what I'm trying to say is, as long as you persevere, as long as you keep on pushing, as long as you're willing to basically persuade the other party of why this is good and why this is good, for what it is. So the one learning on the start of our journey that I realized is this is going to be a roller coaster of a ride. This is going to be us to keep on pushing. Now, obviously, thanks to the CBB that we exist and we have all of this support going on. But at the end of the day, it is truly challenging. And I think anyone on the call would probably be getting into some kind of digital initiative or a digital business that they want to start. They'll all face these challenges in the beginning, but don't stop. Keep on pushing. Keep on pushing. The ministries and the governments and everybody that says no, in order for us to create better regulations in a more digital nation.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to changing the way things have been done, or groundbreaking, let's say, solution for a certain issue that, let's say, a challenge that people already face. Like you mentioned, you had a personal challenge which you thought of a solution for it, and you didn't stop there, but you pursued that, and you made sure that, let's say, regulations have been put in place, and so on. So, so this was.
I just want to add one thing, which is the idea will continuously change and evolve. You will learn new things on the way, and your idea will become better, and you will expand the team, and you'll be able to do more. And I think in our case with Tarabut, that was the idea in the beginning. And then as we started developing the idea, we built an infrastructure, we connected, and then we realized that it was an absolute challenge in integrating to all these different financial institutions in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Beirut, and beyond. And what we realized is, for as long as you start integrating these banks, then other fintechs are going to have the same problem. So how can we help them save time and create a better infrastructure? So have an open mind, and really your business will continue to evolve as you go on.
Yeah. So as the first graduate of the CBB Sandbox, Abdullah, did you receive any preferential treatment? Was it easy setting up, like you highlighted earlier?
I would say, despite what people might think, it was the complete opposite. And the reason why is because I think anyone that comes after us today would not have to do the convincing, would not have to do the explaining and the lobbying. All of the regulations are now in place. All of the regulations are ready. The CBB has an independent unit that looks at these things. They have an independent regulations that license these things. So in the beginning, it was a challenge for us because it was much harder to explain to the banks, to get the banks to see the value proposition and all of these things. But I think in the beginning, absolutely not. It was, on the contrary, it was sending letters after letters after letters. And I'm sure that one day we have them in our office where I keep the letter of the first rejection that we received, and I hold it with pride, and I say, had we listened to this and just shut down, nothing would have happened. But we kept on pushing forward and saying, please listen to us, just give us the opportunity and listen to us. And if you're not convinced about it, then we'll just walk away. And they actually listened to us. I think this is where we're lucky to have, and I think we operate in Bahrain. We're now operating in Abu Dhabi, and we're expanding our jurisdictions into Kuwait and Beirut as well. And when you actually look at our regulator versus everywhere else in the fintech space primarily, we are steps ahead. And that's something that I must acknowledge, which gives us a great opportunity to build in Bahrain and then be able to scale to other parts in the region.
So do you think Bahrain is the best ground for innovation?
I think we've started well. I think we still have a long way to go. Innovation requires a mindset. And I'll tell you honestly, it requires, you can't be 5 entrepreneurs or 5 founders and say, oh, we are the innovation capital of the world. We need hundreds of entrepreneurs. We need everyone on this call to start their own business and start pushing the boundaries, because it's very challenging if you're 1 or 2 or 5. But what makes San Francisco, what makes London is not 1 person or 5 companies or 20 companies. It's thousands of companies that are actually pushing the boundaries all together. And I think that if we can convert over the next few years all of the people that were looking at perhaps joining government jobs and things like that to decide on, let me go the entrepreneurial route. And if I don't do well, I'll join somewhere else and I'll take, but in the beginning, try and get your hand into it and try it out because funding is available.
Yeah, and I think like you said, that things are set up in a better way maybe than it was years ago. And the journey might be easier for those who are starting now. The ecosystem is flourishing, the regulations are set up and there. So taking advantage of all of this and starting, it's going to be, let's say, it wouldn't be like a rosy journey. However, it might not really be like it used to be before.
And the other thing I'll just touch on is it is easier in Bahrain than it is anywhere else that I've at least experienced or been in. And as an entrepreneurial journey, you have the support mechanisms, you have the support systems in place, you have the accelerators, you have all of these. And what it takes is really somebody to follow, literally to just persevere and keep on pushing and have that conviction to run with it. Because we have so many entities, Isra, that don't even exist anywhere else. Tamkeen, these angel fundings, we have these accelerators, you have Bahrain Development Bank, you have the FinTech and Innovation Unit. And I'm not just talking about FinTech, I'm talking about anyone who wants to start a cupcake store or wants to start the most advanced blockchain company in the world. I think Bahrain is a very protected market. And because of us having the cloud and all these regulations in place, it's easy for you to scale up from Bahrain. If you do well in Bahrain, move to Saudi, move to the UAE, move to wherever it is, where you have more population. But in Bahrain, you have I think of it and I call it the protected environment, where it's easy to do things. And I'm not saying easy as in you're just going to make money tomorrow, but there are support mechanisms that you can go to, as opposed to just landing in the middle of Saudi Arabia and trying a new business where there's 25 million people. So I think it's easier to get one thing, which is the most important, which is your product market fit. Test it in Bahrain. Test it in Bahrain, and if it works, then grow it out of here.
Yeah, and I think it's more controlled, it's smaller community. You could test your concept, you could test your product, and if it works, like you said, you can go beyond Bahrain. And we always have our neighbors, like in Saudi, Kuwait, and the GCC, which share with us the same culture and so on, and even the mindset as well. And I think this also adds up to how easy it is for startups to be able to scale up beyond Bahrain as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a book that I strongly suggest everyone that's embarking into this journey to read. It's called The Traction Gap. And it was given to me by a friend, Randall Useri. And basically what it talks about is the journey of a company and the journey of an entrepreneur, of getting your MVP, getting your product market fit, then scaling it up and everything. And if you look at the journey of a startup and as it goes, we have a tendency to not think of these in the back of our heads. The reality is, if you look at the growth in the Western world of how companies get the product market fit, they get more additional capital, they scale into other operations, then they get another round, what they call Series A, B, C, D, and you watch these companies grow. I think here what we have is we have a lot of businesses where founders didn't realize that, hey, by the way, I'm approaching Series V. If I get funding right now, I can grow into North Africa and Saudi and do whatever it is. So I think it's very important for a person to have a vision, but also to have a plan that I will keep on monitoring along with my team, that if I get product market fit and I know that one branch is completely set up, then I'll open my second branch. And here, the growth of companies, people tend to go to bank financing and whatnot. And the idea is the venture capital route is very different. So diluting your stake and to continuously grow and things like that. So I'd say, I'd wrap it up with three. I'd say perseverance, conviction, and a plan, a strategy of what do I want to do and how big do we want to become.
And what do I want to achieve, and at least have some, let's say, a plan with certain deadlines and certain KPIs, let's say, that I want to achieve these, and which keeps you going as well. Because working without a plan definitely maybe you will be launched and you are doing fine. However, you could be doing better, let's say.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing I hate hearing is when people say, I have this idea, it's amazing, and I know it's going to work, but I don't have the money, so I'm not going to do it. And I think that's the worst. You're not an entrepreneur. If you're saying that, you're not an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur will go and speak to his mother and his aunt and his sister and say, give me the money to be able to do it, and actually build it out. So that's where I think it makes the biggest difference. And that's the taboo that we Bahrainis or we people from the Gulf need to break away from. There's no shame in raising capital. Raise capital, take money. If you believe in it, do it. Take the money and you'll grow a business. You're going to make them money. They're going to love you forever for actually making them money. And this is where I think it's important for us as entrepreneurs to start telling people that are coming into the journey after us is, I remember the best advice I got from Chris Rogers, one of our board members today, was, Abdullah, take money from people, because you using your own money is a completely different management style when you're worried about every penny that you're spending versus the money that you. So when you see CEOs of companies that are the best CEOs in the world, they're typically running public companies. When you're spending your own money, you might be the kind of person that watches the penny and how it's spent and tries to get an employee because he's cheaper or whatnot. So I think use people's money, use venture capital, because it'll make you a better CEO.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Abdullah, for this insightful discussion. I would also like our students to get the chance to speak to you, address you, ask any questions they may have. Guys, whoever has a question, please, you could raise your hand. Let's hear it from you as well. We have some students with us who have really bright ideas, really great ideas. Some of them, they are thinking of starting businesses in areas that they are not really expert in. And I think they might have this, they need the reassurance that you don't need to be the expert in that area to be able to pursue it. It's always, you have this learning curve as well.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, I must tell you how the idea of Tarabut came. Is I was sitting in my office in Bahrain, and I got an email from someone from the alumni of where I did my MBA talking about fintech. And I was in Bahrain at the time. And I read that and I knew nothing about fintech, absolutely nothing. And started reading up about it, started learning about it. I am not a software developer. I am not an engineer. I don't have a PhD from any engineering schools. I understand business, I understand numbers, I understand people, but I'm not an expert in technology. And I think that's the most important thing is you don't need to be a data scientist to start a data science company. You don't need to be, it's a very different time where you need to surround yourself with people that know what they're doing and are really good at what they're doing. But what you need to have as a founder is the vision, is what you want to achieve and be able to bring people together and have that conviction. In our world today, Isra, if you ask me, I would say it's very important for you to be able to have that conviction, to sit across from someone and be able to persuade them to put money in your idea. That's what you need to be as a founder.
Yeah. And I think like everybody, we don't have or we don't know everything. We always need other people to work with us, have a great team, and let's say the chemistry between the people who are working together, like you also said, Abdullah, and their conviction as well. It's not just yours. You are going to pull each other up and make sure that you are balanced and on ground.
Absolutely. And I think I learned something new from my team. I always say that my team is better than me in everything. Every single one of them is better than me in what they do. And that's how we can progress as a company. So the idea is you make decisions based on their recommendations, but you don't become an expert lawyer. You don't become an expert accountant. You need to be able to understand these different things and read as much as you can. But I think realistically speaking, you need to believe in this team. You need to believe in this company to be able to persuade the other side to either join your team or be able to invest into your company to take it forward.
And to believe in you as well.
Absolutely.
We have here Amna Al-Amar. She says, hello, thank you for the talk. It's very insightful. One question. She's asking about investors in Bahrain. Where can we find investors in Bahrain?
So it depends on where you are on your entrepreneurial journey. I think the one thing, investors today, as we're talking on Team, don't only exist in Bahrain. There are seed and early stage investors all around the world. If you go on Google and you look for early stage venture capital in the GCC, I can name you some of the top names, Shuruq Ventures in the UAE, Al-Waha Fund of Funds. I'd reach out to Al-Waha in Bahrain and say, I have a great idea. But investors are not going to want to speak to you unless you've really thought of your idea well. So don't worry about the investors in Bahrain. You look for, just Google angel investors if you're very early stage. Look for seed investors if you're slightly later than that. Look for Series A if you're already got your product market fit. There's 10 more in Bahrain that I'm aware of that do early stage investing. I know Al-Waha Fund of Funds just invested in Shuruq Ventures, which all have offices in Bahrain. Middle East Venture Partners are in Bahrain. All of the family offices, to be honest with you, that I've had conversations with are all open to hear about ideas. And if somebody has ideas, it all depends on how much capital that you need. I think every single one of these has a threshold. If you need $20,000 or $100,000 or $500,000, they're all different scales of within the company journey. So I'd say look for either angel investors or Series A or seed, depending on where you are in your ideation.
All right. We have also Marcel, he's asking, what about the best way nowadays to invest our money? So he's thinking the other way around. He wants to be an investor. So which category?
I mean, I used to look at this a lot, and since we're talking about entrepreneurship, it's a very different aspect if you're looking for capital preservation or capital creation. If you're looking to preserve your money and just make 5-6% returns, invest in government bonds and invest in. But if you actually want to invest in creating capital, there's no asset class that will give you the returns of venture capital. So find fellow entrepreneurs that are now going to become and invest into them, I would say. Invest into these ideas, because these are the ideas where you'll be able to double your capital in no time.
Yeah, and I think, yes, most of, let's say, so many of our students, they are always thinking about funding as one of these struggles that they are facing. And another thing would be, like I mentioned earlier, the skills that they have. If I want to start a business, for example, I want to develop an app that does A, B, and C, and I don't have the skills. Do I hire someone to do the development for you? And in addition to these, they also have the, let's say, the struggle that they don't want to disclose their ideas because they feel that if we did, it's going to be stolen or taken.
I would say on that example, let me give you a short story on that. I would say if you have an idea for an app, but you don't know how to build an app and you've never built an app before, partner with somebody who becomes your co-founder, who has built an app before and knows how to build the app, and let them be your partners, because you will need a technical partner. The one other thing that I strongly want to convey as a very clear message is capital is not the hardest thing to get. If your idea is crystal clear and the people believe that you have the team to be able to execute it, then people will give you the money. The reality here is, I think the most important thing is for you to be able to be confident enough to be able to take people's money to be able to execute it. So partner with these people that are alongside you.
All right, now we have some daring questions from Ahmed. So if you allow me, Abdullah. So he says, hello, thanks for the amazing talk. Question number 1, at which stage you realize your business have failed?
The first business, I'll tell you that it's a very easy thing. I look at businesses, in my opinion at least, fulfill a role of growth. If your business is not constantly growing and you've reached this plateau, then it's not the kind of business I want to be in. Because how do you benchmark the success of a business? Is it that you're making returns on your capital on an annual basis? Not really. The reality is businesses need to continue to grow. And if you look at the biggest companies in the world today and you look at their bottom line. So the moment I realized that the business had failed was we started missing payments. Our revenues were not growing. And it started to actually require me to put in more capital on a monthly basis, to which I decided to shut it down. So the lack of growth month on month, year on year is what made me realize that this is a failing business.
You had like indications that you are not doing as well as you anticipated, and you don't think it's going to get better. So this is when you just decided, I'm going to pull the plug on this.
Absolutely. And I think the moment you can be in a red zone when you're anticipating that things will get better. But when you're in a red zone and the best case scenario is you actually invest more capital to be able to break even, I think that's when you realize, is it worth my time? Is it worth my time? And it's the hardest decision that you'll make is to pull the plug, because it's you acknowledging your failure, to say, you know what, I just wasted 2 years of my life doing nothing. And that's the hardest thing. But when you think of the opportunities that come after it, I think pull the plug, fail. Everyone does it, unless you're 1 out of 1,000,000. And if you are, please reach out to me. I'd love to invest with you as well.
All right. Now, the second question, he's asking about recommendation of books that he would read that will help him through his journey.
I would say definitely read The Traction Gap. I would say read biographies about people that are in a sector that you love and have become very successful. One book that I love reading is about a guy called Mark Rich. It's called The King of Oil. And it shows you his perseverance despite everything. Very controversial story, but really about a story about somebody that pushed all boundaries and was able to success. And then the obvious success stories. Read about Netflix, read about Phil Knight and the Nike store, read about all of these success stories. The one thing that I think as we embark into entrepreneurship, one thing that they don't teach us or didn't teach me in business school, and it's an entirely new business model that I think anyone that will become the most successful in this region must master the craft of platform businesses. I think platform businesses are the most important new business model that everybody needs to master. So read a book called The Platform Revolution. The Platform Revolution is something that will teach you about what do Amazon, Airbnb, Netflix, Uber all have in common? They're all platform businesses. Do we have any platform businesses in the region right now, with the exception of Kareem? And if you look at the valuations of Boutiquat or Tarabut and all of these, they're all platform businesses. So I strongly urge everyone to read about platform businesses and get into it as fast as possible.
Now, his last question, which I'm really hesitant to read, he says, does your family name, now did your family name helps you, as it's a well-known family in Bahrain?
I have to be honest. I mean, the journey, it did help me in that in the early stages, I did get support, financial support, but it's exactly the role of every single founder in the world. The first people that you need to be able to convince to invest into your company are the people around you. But bear in mind, these are the same people that you have lunch with, you have dinner with, and you sit down. And imagine, I mean, I'll give you my case. My father's in his 70s, and whenever I speak to him about my business, the only question he asks me is it making money yet? And the answer is no. So their mentality of how they look at these businesses is something completely different when it's a data company and it's a long-term play and things like that. So I'm going to have the exact same problems that any one of you is how do you explain a digital company to people that don't necessarily get it? That was in the beginning. to be able to get to the MVP stage. And I actually made a mistake, and I'll tell you this, is I invested a lot of my own capital into the company, which made it harder for me at a later stage to raise money from venture capital. My advice to you would be start, if you have the initial money to be able to do something yourself, start very early stage, because investors want to see that you have skin in the game. And if you lose, you'll lose, and it will be detrimental. Number two is start raising capital early. Go to angel investors, go learn this craft of pitching. Get investors from your cousins, from your families, from angel investors at a very early stage. Yeah.
We have one more question. How can a person who's interested in investment and trading in the market, where can he improve himself in Bahrain?
Interested in trading in the market as in equity trading?
I think, yeah, investment and trading, the question. I think, yeah, maybe he's thinking about, let's say, certain skills that a person could have, which will make him a good investor, like he's going to invest in other businesses and so on.
I would say join a venture today, in today's world, join a venture capital. Get a job for 2 years, contrary to what I was saying earlier. But if you want to learn the craft, or read every single book that is out there about venture capital, read about the best investors, Benchmark, Sequoia, all of the best investors in the world, read about them, their journeys, these venture capitals, read Hoffman, all of these guys. It'll teach you the craft. That's if you're talking about how can I become a better investor.
All right, now we have one last comment. Zainab saying that I imagine the size of, let's say, the struggle that you went through in order to start Tarabut, and I appreciate your effort, as I am very excited with the TG useful services for end users. Her question is, what are their benefits from TG services? I think she means that what banks are going to benefit, how banks are going to benefit from the services that Tarabut is offering. So
I think the most important thing is customer demand. Today, we want an experience from our banks. We want categorization. We want an experience like we deal with our Amazon accounts or our YouTube accounts, where things are intuitive, where as soon as you log in, you don't need to click 15 times before you choose the kind of book that you like to read, or you don't need to click 15 times before the videos that you like typically watch. We're helping banks on that digitization journey. And I say that in terms of we're helping banks, we're working with these banks to create better customer experiences that their customers are after. And that's really the benefit. I can get into it, but it's a journey. Our product roadmap gets us to the stage of how we actually get to the stage of building out these propositions going forward.
Right. Is there someone's mic open here? No.
I think it was my side, but we're okay.
All right. Okay. No worries. So thank you, Abdullah. Thank you for joining us today, sharing your story with our students, sharing your journey. And we are really excited about Tarabut Gateway, and we are really looking forward to see others go through the same journey that you went through, and coming up with innovative solutions, innovative businesses out there. And thank you for your efforts, and great to have you today.
Thank you for having me. I hope I gave you something that's valuable. Thank you very much.
It was great. Thank you so much. Have a great day.